Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight's Beetcoin Dialogue. Before I get to our featured guest, Will Harris, who we're very pleased to call a friend and fellow traveler and hard worker and inspirational farmer. Will, you didn't know you were all those things. I know you didn't. Before we turn to Will, I just wanted to say a couple of quick things. The obvious thing for those of you who are new is that this is called Beetcoin Dialogue because it's brought to you by Beetcoin.org, which is a real thing. And those of you who haven't been to the website yet, shame on you. Go to the website, check it out. I believe we will have on tonight's thing, I can't see every person on here, and I'm not going to try to figure it out right now, but we just hired, as of today, a marketing firm in Seattle. And I believe one or both of the partners of that firm will be on the call tonight on the Zoom to help us begin making a marketing plan for Beetcoin.org. So while we've been live for several months, we've done no marketing yet. All we're doing is hosting these conversations as a way of just beginning to warm everybody up to the idea of a new web platform that raises money to help start and grow local community groups that make 0% loans to farms. So if you don't know what it is yet, please go to the website and spend enough time there to see what we're doing. Because of what's going on in Ukraine, I'm just going to take maybe 2 minutes and just read a few paragraphs that happen to be from my last book that have to do a little bit with the subject of nonviolence and peace and whatever. And I know it's all weighing on our minds a lot in different ways. So because of that, today I invited Wendell Berry's daughter, Mary, who is actually a good friend of Will's also, to join us 2 weeks from now for the next Beetcoin Dialogue. And she's checking her schedule. She wasn't able to confirm on the spot today, but I think she's going to do it. Hopefully she will. And the next one, 2 weeks from now, is going to be called Some Thoughts on Food and Nonviolence in honor of Wendell Berry. And I'll be reading some stuff from Wendell Berry and a little bit from me, and trying to kind of go deeper into what is behind much of what I and we are doing in terms of healing and no harm investing and growing food without killing things, and etc. So, and last bit of housekeeping, I'll say we just went live today with a page on the Beetcoin.org website called Dial. You'll see a tab on there called Dialogues. If you go to that tab, you'll see all the recordings of all the past ones and the beginning of the future schedule. And we'll start filling in the future schedule going out further. So everything we do tonight will go up there probably by tomorrow. So let me just read a few quick things. You'll quickly see why I'm doing it. So in the front of my book, it has an epigram that quotes John Bogle, who was the founder of the Vanguard Group. For those of you who have never heard of John Bogle, I think most people on the call may have heard of the Vanguard Group, one of the largest asset managers on the planet. And here's what John Bogle said: "Have we forgotten that the most productive investing is the simplest investing, the most peaceable investing?" I'm jumping around here, so just bear with me. If John Bogle were still with us, I'd ask him what he meant by peaceable investing. It's a word also used frequently by Wendell Berry. Quote, "An economy based on waste is inherently and hopelessly violent, and war is its inevitable byproduct. We need a peaceable economy," unquote. To have a peaceable economy, we need peaceable people. I don't see how people can be peaceable in the most fundamental and enduring sense if they are living in a state of existential fear, tethered to consumer confidence and distant supply chains and layers of financial intermediation over which they have no control. All right, one more. Now, this was written about COVID, not about the current situation in Ukraine. This was written 18 months ago, so just keep that in mind. "The urgency of the current moment is overwhelming. Our ability to respond effectively depends on our understanding of the words, the current moment. What do they mean? The moment the number of COVID-19 cases spikes, the moment the Dow Jones Industrial Average crashes, the moment fish are spotted swimming back up commerce-free canals in Venice, the moment before protest erupts, the moment global population peaks, or as Greg Easterbrook wrote in A Moment on the Earth, quote, the juncture at which a profound positive development of history began, the moment when people, machines, and nature began negotiating terms of truce. All right. Thank you for letting me do that. Actually, you didn't let me. I just did it and you were patient. Thank you. All right. Turning to these immediate subjects at hand tonight. I thought I would just share this little teaser from the book. What does systemic change in food and finance look like here in the United States, the home of fast food and fast money? At first blush, it doesn't look local at all. It looks like fake meat. Fake meat brims with innovation. It screams of technological optimism. Look more closely, however, and what you see is a more advanced form of food industrialization, offering solutions to problems caused by a less advanced form of food industrialization, that is, feedlots and meat processing. Fake meat does address these problems, but what looks like disruptive change to the system is really product innovation within the system, which is why it attracts venture capital. Fake meat is to the food industry what autonomous helicopters are to the military industrial complex. A new way to play the game, but not a new game. And so, as with so many technologies, we cannot be sure that it won't lead to a new set of future problems. While we chase such technological solutions, with climate change pushing us into an all of the above mode, let's also remember that we've been down this road before. With margarine, I mean fake butter, prompting local food and organics foremother Joan Gussow to reflect, quote, I prefer butter to margarine because I trust cows more than I trust chemists, unquote. Invent technology that replaces the cow? Okay, if we must, but there's also another way, the way leading to healthier, more balanced relationships with cow, grass, soil, sun, and one another. So I didn't write that thinking I was going to be using it to introduce Will Harris, but I think it serves as a decent introduction to Will Harris. I've already taken too much time, so I'm just going to throw it right over to Will. Will's presentation, the slides are going to be advanced by Kyle Barr, who's on the Slow Money team. So Will, you're going to have to remember to say to Kyle, next slide, please. Kyle, go ahead and share your screen and we can get going with tonight's presentation. Will, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Woody. I appreciate being here with you folks tonight. Let's get the first slide, Kyle. So my name's Will Harris. I own White Oak Pastures, which is a farm in Bluffton, Georgia. I am the fourth generation of my family to manage this farm. I'm aided by two of my daughters, their spouses, and between the two of them, they've got three grandchildren. They've provided me with three grandchildren on the ground today and two more on the way. So very, very excited about that. Sixth generation has arrived, although they haven't helped us do much yet. So the farm today is 3,200 acres. It's contiguous lies along Highway 27, which is in the bottom left corner of Georgia, almost Alabama, almost Florida. It's about 4 miles long and 1 mile wide. And we pasture raise 5 red meat species: cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits. And we hand butcher them here in 2 USDA abattoir slaughterhouses I built on the farm, one for poultry, one for red meat. We also pasture raise 5 poultry species: chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, and ducks. We have certified organic vegetables. We have pastured eggs, honey. We are planting some fruit trees and nut trees, and generally just try to create as many different enterprises or income streams as we can to take advantage of the bounty, the abundance that this farm provides. A really exciting opportunity that's presented itself is we started 2 years ago providing vegetation management under an 800-acre solar voltaic array using our sheep and poultry, and that has gone really, really well. And we're expanding it. We'll be on 3,800 acres by the end of 2003. Also, here on the farm, we've developed some little ancillary businesses that were made possible by the changes we made to the farm. We have a general store, a restaurant. We just built a recreational vehicle park. We've got cabins for lodging, and there's just a lot of real exciting stuff going on here, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be part of it. I'll tell you that we're the largest private employer in Clay County, Georgia. I'll tell you that Clay County, Georgia, according to Wikipedia, was the poorest county in the United States of America in 2020, based on per household income. So it's so what I'll do now is I'll tell you a little bit about how we got here. So this slide shows my great-grandfather and grandfather. My great-grandfather founded this farm in 1866 and farmed it the rest of his life, and was followed by my grandfather, Will Carter Harris. You know, we don't know a hell of a lot about the way those guys farmed. The Harrises have never been real good record keepers or writers like my friend Woody. What we know is mostly anecdotal, but they would have run this farm as a multi-species farm, all the processing done on the farm, and with a lot of focus on the land and the animals and the community. And then that's the way it was, the way people farmed in that era. Show me the next slide. But after those guys, things changed. My great-grandfather ran the farm to the end of World War II. In World War II, my dad took over. He was born in 1920. And that's when his generation and my generation really changed agriculture. You know, from the time the first man or woman put the first seed in the ground or domesticated the first animal, changes in agriculture, our agricultural food production, were pretty subtle. But after World War II, it went into hydrodrive. And that's one of my favorite subjects, that period of history. I'm fascinated by it. But the changes were made because there was so much demand. Post-World War II, Europe was starving. But even more because there was so much technology that was made available through the war effort that was suddenly available to farming, agricultural production, and land management. I'll list just a few of them here, although there are many. You know, ammoniated fertilizer was actually invented or found, created in the late 1800s, but it was so expensive that farmers didn't use it much. But after World War II, the millions and millions of dollars that had been spent for munitions, ammunition factories, could be repurposed to make ammoniated fertilizer. And suddenly ammoniated fertilizer was just very, very cheap. And my father started to use it. He went to a meeting I like telling that story, but I'm not going to take the time tonight. He went to a meeting, was exposed to ammoniated fertilizer, and he or I used ammoniated fertilizer on every acre of land we had every year from 1946 until I quit using it in the late 90s, so 50 years. Other changes were the nerve gas. The amount of money spent on laboratory chemistry to produce nerve gas could be used for pesticides. And 2,4-D was one of them. And in my family, we used herbicides, insecticides, pesticides of all sorts every year till I quit using them. Some of the things were a little more novel than that. My father's generation and preceding it had plowed mules. If they didn't plow themselves, they had employees plow them. They went to the European theater and operated tanks. When they came home, they did not want to plow a mule anymore, so they bought tractors. So those changes were sweeping and done for good reason. There was a great need for cheap, abundant, safe food. And the wildly successful implementation of these things made food, I think, obscenely cheap and wastefully abundant and boringly consistent. Give me the next page. And these are the guys that did it. So that's my dad, Wendell Harris. Under his management, the farm embraced all the technologies I just talked about, and moved from a multicultural, multi-species farm to a monoculture of only cattle. And then his spawn, me, took over the farm. I graduated from the University of Georgia in 1976. And I'd been raised and trained by my father, who was a magnificent industrial cattleman. Brought my degree home and ran the farm for 20 years and made it even more industrialized than my dad had. Next slide, please. But we did do something about it. So here, this is the two daughters that work with me on the farm today. They are two, and today the farm is run much differently. For many years, I was the only decision maker on the farm. When I started transitioning in the mid-90s, I had 3 or 4 minimum wage employees. Today, we've got 180 employees. And the way we managed is 7 directors, me and those 2 girls, and one of them has a wife, one of them has a husband. They are directors, and the 2 non-family directors. Those 7 directors manage 26 managers who are really just wonderful, passionate people. And they manage the other 150 or whatever's left out of that 180. Next slide. So that economic transition of 4 employees and maybe $2 million in volume to today's 180 employees and $25 million in volume was made possible because we transitioned the farm from the commoditized, centralized, industrialized model that my dad and I had run back to more of a holistically managed farm that was focused on the animals, the land, and then oddly the community. I say oddly because the first 2 changes I made in the way we managed the animals and the way we managed the land was very, very, very intentional. I started making the changes because I was enjoying the production system I was part of less and less and less. The very linear, scalable, monocultural system that I had managed for 20 years, it had just become displeasing to me. I had gotten tired of the excesses of it. By that time, I was running a feedlot, large feedlot for this part of the world, and literally feeding chicken manure and corn and soy to cattle to make them gain weight. And just decided I didn't like that anymore. Not overnight, but over a period of time. So I focused on the animals, and what made me happy was allowing the animals to express their instinctive behavior. So I turned them out of the feedlot, quit feeding chicken manure, quit growing corn on the land, and liked it a lot better. It was it was not profitable. I was very fortunate. I had inherited the farm, a little over 1,000 acres of land, and a good herd of cattle and a little money, not a lot. But we were very successful cattle people. We were good at that, and not rich people by any means, I can assure you. But we paid taxes every year. When cattle were cheap, we made a little bit of money and paid taxes. And when cattle were higher, we invested it back in the farm, still paid a little tax. But I just didn't enjoy it as much. And when I focused on the animals, they were the canary in the coal mine for me. I enjoyed it more. And that very quickly caused me to focus on the land. Give me the next slide. And the land became my passion, and it still is my passion. You know, we similarly to becoming dissatisfied with the way we raise our animals, I became dissatisfied with what my land had become. I could walk across my fields, or even worse, in my feedlot, and the land, the soil was a dead mineral medium. And I could go in the edge of the woods, and it was just a living, organic matter that was teeming with life. And I liked that a lot better than the dead mineral medium. And it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that why it was so different. You know, I was using intense tillage and a lot of chemical fertilizers, copious amounts of pesticides. And it killed the life in the land. The picture you see in the middle there of the building kind of on the left and the field on the right is the north land line of my farm. What's to the left is my farm. What's to the right is the farm of actually a cousin of mine who still farms very industrially. And 25 years ago, they looked just exactly alike. We had to, you know, there was it wasn't a fence, it was a stop in the ground, post in the ground. So we knew where his stopped and mine started because it all looked just alike. Today, the land on the left is a little over 5% organic matter, and the land on the right is a 0.5% organic matter. And you probably know this, but to put it in context, 1% organic matter will absorb a 1-inch rain event. So my land today will absorb a 5-inch rain event, and we get those in Georgia. And my cousin's side will only hold a 1-inch rain event, or 1/2 inch actually. And I've got some other videos that are really compelling demonstrating that. And when I made the changes, the ceased to use those technical tools that science had given us. It was like magic. And it didn't happen as fast as I wanted it to, but the land returned. In the middle and the bottom is a dung beetle. And I hadn't seen a dung beetle for 20 years, but I remembered them as a kid. And they came back, and just many things. On the bottom left corner, you'll see our pasture poultry houses. And the green, and that's on a really new piece of land. It's really a dead piece of land. But the little green streaks you see or where those houses have been moved, they're all portable on skids. Where the poultry manure is bringing life back to the soil. Next slide. So I told you that the things we think we're good at, the things that we really focused on, are the animals, the land, and the community. And I told you that the changes that we chose to make for the land and the animals were very, very intentional. What I'm telling you now is the community also changed dramatically, but we never intended to change the community. Bluffton, 15 years ago, was literally a ghost town. It had a population of about 400 at one time. It was a trade center for 10,000 people. By the time I returned from college, it was the only business in town was a post office. All you could buy was a stamp, and it was only open about half the time. But when we brought 190, 180 full-time employees here and paid them well above the county average, and I'm not real proud of what we pay our employees, but I am very proud of how much it is above the county average. They needed a place to eat and sleep and shop and drink and play, and we built it. And today, I'm just very, very proud. Bluffton has gone from a ghost town to a very nice little destination. It doesn't rival Disney World, but it's a very nice place. And that was completely by unintentional. It's just what it was. Most of the unintended consequences I've had in my life were negative, but the rebirth of Bluffton is a very positive unintended consequence that I'm very happy about, even though it was not intentional. So we are focused on replicating what we've done here, and we formed a nonprofit, the 501c3, called the Center for Agricultural Resilience. And we're hosting week-long training sessions to try to help people think differently about land management, animal management, food production. It's not a how-to farm. There are plenty of how-to farm models out there, but this is a really high-level view of changing agriculture. We're very proud of it. We're actually having a session this week. Next slide. So I've told you a little bit about what we did, what happened, and what it caused. And I want you to take 1 second and help you understand, if you don't already, the difference. So on the right, the land animals vertically in silos, literally siloed, is the way we used to manage our farm. Very linear, highly scalable, focused on production, output, very input intensive, but focused on output with little real regard for the land, the animal, and the community. And what we did is move to the model that's on the left. That was the model of my great-grandfather and grandfather, and now me and my daughters. But it is very cyclical. The land, the focus of every decision every day is the resilience of the land and the animals and the community. And how we got here is we applied the factory model that was brought to us by reductionist science to a very cyclical system. I'm part of the Savory International Holistic Management Institute. We're a hub. We practice and teach holistic land management. And we talk about the difference in complex systems and complicated systems. And your body or the United States government or other is a complex system. There's a lot going on to make it work. And this computer I'm talking on, or your watch, is a very complicated system. There's a lot going on to make it work. In a complex system, if one component ceases to operate, it's everything morphs and it continues to move forward. In a complicated system, when one component breaks down, the system stops. The complex system is very, very cyclical. The complicated system is very linear. It's the factory model. The cyclical complex system is highly replicatable. I'm going to tell you more about that in a minute. The complicated system is very, very, that's scalable. It's actually supposed to say scalable, very scalable. You know, the complex system is highly resilient. The linear system is very efficient. You know, during the pandemic panic, I was drinking coffee, watching CNN one morning, and the screen said the CEO of Tyson was quoted that the American food production system is breaking. I took a picture of it, got it on my phone. And he was right. It was breaking. It was breaking because we had swapped all the resilience for efficiency to make food cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So when we did apply that factory model to a very complex system, which is the farm, it is ending poorly. Next slide. And in conclusion, because let's go back a little. That's my grandchildren, and you don't need to go on and on about how good they look. The other slide. So when I said that this transition that we've made is highly replicatable, I absolutely meant it. As a practitioner of 25 years, I can tell you that there should be a white oak pastures of some scale, and it can be of any scale. It doesn't have to be really, really big or really, really small, but there should be one or more white oak pastures in every agricultural county in America. And there can be, because here, this one was done by a C student from Land Grant University Ag College. That's me. It didn't take a Fulbright scholar and a trust fund, or Bill Gates didn't help me. It's just a very modest intellect and very modest bank statement can form this food system. And I intentionally call it food system. And we used to be part of a big food system, big food. But now we're our own little small food system. And that's so much better for the land and the animals and the community. So that's all I can think to tell you. There's another great Georgian, Forrest Gump says. That's all I got to say about that. So, Woody, any questions or comments?
All right, as we go into the conversation part, oh, come on, let's give the guy a round of applause. Come on. First, I have to point out that we did have a Fulbright scholar on last time. we had Marco Evangelisti on last time, who was talking about slow money and no harm investing. For those of you who missed it, he's born in Italy and he came to the U.S. as a Fulbright scholar, etc. Anyway, you can check him out on the dialogue page. You'll see the recording of his session. But Will, thank you so much. I think before we throw it open to general questions, now guys, you can either put questions in the chat room if you prefer, or you can just raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself and jump in. There's 55 of us on here, and it might be slightly chaotic if everyone just unmutes themselves, but I don't think it'll be too bad. So we can kind of just feel our way towards the conversation here. While you guys are collecting your thoughts and your questions, though, I wanted to start Will off with just to expand a little bit on things he touched on. So Will, you kind of mentioned at one point in the story, kind of the financial scale, the number of employees, the size of the farm, et cetera. I think it'd be interesting for people to just hear a little bit more about, let's say, I know some of this, I know a little bit of it, but some of the high and low points maybe in the journey that took you from where you started to where you are now. Like, how did you end up at 3,200 acres, and how did you end up with your own abattoir? And I know it wasn't always a straight line, so maybe just share some of the highlights.
So first of all, let me to get ahead of that, let's talk about scale a little bit. Scale is highly situational, highly situational. And my situation, I thought, called for me to operate at this fairly large scale that we're operating at. You know, I get the question a lot. What's the right scale? What should it be? And the fact is, there is no right scale. If you live in the right zip code with the right market, you can take a very small part of your yard and generate a lot of revenue and make a living. You know, in our case, I just told you I'm in the what may be the poorest county in the country, certainly one of the poorest counties in the country. So I don't have a local market. And I was a cattleman. That was the only kind of farming that I thought I was good at. So when I became disillusioned with the industrial farming, I certainly moved towards what I knew, cattle. And we had about 1,000 acres of land at the time. I just started raising them the way I wanted to. I was headed towards nothing. I was headed away from doing things I didn't like to the land and the animals. And suddenly I was not making money anymore. I'd gone from making money to not making money because I was putting value in those cattle that I couldn't extract back out of the commodity market. So I created the brand. The farm was called White Oak Pastures. So I created the brand White Oak Pastures, started marketing direct to consumers, and was able to extract the money, more of my money back out of it. It was better. And I was processing them by buying the excess slaughter capacity at little local slaughterhouses. And that worked well. And I was not yet profitable, but I could see us heading in a good direction. So I felt good about it. But the local slaughterhouses ran out of capacity before I got profitable. So at that point, I either had to go back to raising cattle industrially, which I didn't want to do, or keep losing money the way on the route that I was, or build my own slaughter plant. And I did. Because I had been left a farm, I sought bank financing, good old boy collateral credit, and got it, and built a slaughterhouse. And then that worked well. In fact, I sold Whole Foods Market the first pound of American grass-fed beef that they marketed as American grass-fed beef. And we did well for a while, but I had to increase the size of the farm to meet the capacity of the slaughter plant. So I borrowed some more money. And then I found out that I really needed other species on the farm if I was going to give up pesticides and fertilizer. And, nature abhors monoculture. So I borrowed some more money and reached the point that, I had taken an incredible risk and put myself in a position where I could lose the farm that my great-grandfather, grandfather, and father had accumulated for me. And then there was some sleepless nights, but the business did catch traction. And today, it is very subtly profitable. I should tell you that, I brag about our farm. I'm very proud of it. I wouldn't change a thing. It brought my family back to the land. They wouldn't have come industrially. But we've got 20-something $million invested in a very break-even-ish business, very break-even-ish. And it's okay. I'm fine. I pay myself and my children a comfortable salary out of it. Me and my children are not the highest paid employees here. I've got a controller and a director of operations who make more than we do. They're paid more than we are, but they have a skill set we don't have. So that was a long answer, but I think it answers the question.
All right, thank you for that. I got a few, let's see, there are a few questions in the chat room. The last one says, what areas of farm work do your daughters perform?
That's a good question. So for many years, I was the only decision maker on the farm. I had employees, but I was the only decision maker. And when we grew the number of employees that we have and the diversity of the company, I didn't hire any more decision makers for a long time. And that resulted in several things. One is the farm was in a position, so if something happened to me, it would be game over for everybody. So I was the only one making decisions. Number two is I was making so many decisions that the quality of decisions was not great. I was flying from one crisis to the next. So I hired a very, very smart young man who's a graduate degree in meat science from the University of Florida to run the processing side of my business. And he has done that for years and done it wonderfully. And he is, anything processing he's in charge of. I later hired a controller, a woman with several graduate degrees who's just brilliant. And she's run our business from the administrative perspective great for many years. And I would have broke us if I didn't have her to say no. Then my first daughter came back, and I wouldn't let her come back to the farm when she first graduated from college. I made her go get a job. She ultimately came back. She is now our director of marketing. That's what her degree was in, what her other work was. She's over our online, the social media, the website, which is whiteoakpastures.com, over the online store. She's over the Internet Oil Fulfillment Center. We do all oil fulfillment here from the farm. Anything along those lines, she's in charge of. She's probably got 40 employees, several managers under her. The other daughter, Jody, is director of tourism. I don't necessarily like that, but that's what they chose. But she manages everything that's customer facing. The store, we are a restaurant. We serve 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. Recreational vehicle park, the cabins that we rent for lodging. She's got a lot. The 501c3, the meetings, sales things. She's probably got 30, 40 employees under her. Her husband, John, is managing the farm. She and his wife, Amber, is value-added products, candles, soap, leather products, pet shoes, pet treats. She got a lot of stuff under her. Then I guess that's the 7. So that's what we all do. Everybody is, and when we meet every Wednesday at 1:30. It's a formal meeting in my office here. We got an itinerary agenda. We go down it and we talk about everything. Everybody speaks with equal voice. I own 100% of the company, but I'm only one of 7 directors. And I don't always get my way.
Will, while you were giving that answer, the following came in. It's in the chat room. It says, Mr. Harris, you are probably familiar with 44 Farms and Walmart. Any thoughts on bringing your brand to retail?
I'm actually not familiar with 44 Farms, certainly not Walmart. I can imagine what it is that a captive farm providing for Walmart? It would be my guess, though I don't know that. But no, in fact, we're the Whole Foods Market, Publix, and Kroger are my three biggest customers, and they're good people. They're wonderful people. They bought from me every week for 20 years, and they pay me on time. But the relationship between White Oak Pastures and those retailers has been cooling for some time. No falling out. Nobody's treated anybody badly. But the fact is, a family farm like this one does not fit well in that model. If you think about it, we talked about post-World War II. Also post-World War II, big grocery and food service, industrial farming, and big food companies all started. And those three, again, big grocery, food service, big food, and industrial farms. Those three co-evolved from not being much of anything to feeding all of us today. And as they co-evolved, they became codependent. And it's very hard for big grocery companies to do business with people like me. I hear farmers say that those people want us out of business. That's not true. It's just we don't fit. You know, a big grocery or food service company meat procurement person needs to be able to pick up the phone and call a big industrial meat company, big food company, and say, I need 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets delivered to the following 8 warehouses. And we're about as big as any regenerative farm that's out here. And I'll never see 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets. It's not going to happen. So they've been good to us, but the disconnect is difficult. So we're moving more into the online sales direct to consumer.
There's something else in here, Will, that I think might be a little bit of a cue to go back to the story you didn't tell us earlier. I think you were about to tell a story about your dad and seeing the ammonia, what it did to the grass, so maybe this is your cue to go back and tell. So the comment is someone who came on a little bit late, so she wasn't sure what she missed, but I'm curious to know how you came to know that industrial farming was having detrimental effects and what it was that motivated you to change. So I don't know if, take a shot at that.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. So Woody knows all my stories. We've been around the horn together. So I mentioned briefly that post-World War II, the little farm center, which is right next door to where I am now, it's no longer in business, had a meeting that a fertilizer company sponsored. They paid for to have a fish fry or barbecue or whatever it was. So all the local farmers came, including my dad. He was about 25 years old at the time. And they fed the farmers, and the ask was he brought 200-pound bags of ammoniated fertilizer. And he got a scoop, and he scooped up 10 or something pounds and put it in little small bags and gave it to every one of the farmers with the request that they go back home and sprinkle it out on their grass, straight line or circle, or write their name or whatever they want to do, and then water it in and leave it for 3 or 4 days and come back and look at it. And when that ammoniated fertilizer reacted with that probably 6 or 8% organic matter soil, because it was virgin, it just exploded. The grass, when my dad came back, was this much higher than the surrounding grass, and was 5 shades darker green, and it was a silver bullet. And he he fell in love with it. And he and me following him, used ammoniated fertilizer on every acre every year from 1945 to the mid-90s. And what he could see was that big, beautiful, lush green grass. It's like working out and taking steroids. What he couldn't see is the damage it was doing, the unintended consequence of oxidizing the organic matter in the soil and destroying the microbial balance in the soil and all the other things that it did. Just like when you use steroids, you can't see the negatives initially.
Gee, that's not the whole story, but we'll have to settle for that.
So, well, and so I guess the whole story would be, fast forward me 50 years later, started to see the unintended consequence and didn't like it. And the only choice I had was to move away from it. I guess maybe that's the whole story.
Why don't you just say, let's just continue on this vein a little bit. You had on one of your slides, well, the words something to the effect of livestock as a tool for fostering the cycles of nature, right? So why don't you just say, kind of follow the thread a little bit to kind of what that means to you now.
Good. So I'm often asked, or I often hear people ask, this regenerative land management, what is that? How do you describe it? What is it? And it's so simple to me. It is regenerative land management is restarting the cycles of nature that industrial agriculture has broken. The cycles of nature are, and I think they're probably some we don't even recognize, but are the water cycle, the energy cycle, the mineral cycle, the microbial cycle, the carbon cycle, the community dynamics, the grazing cycle, just on and on, the things that occurred naturally in the evolution of the earth. And when we use these tools that technology gave us to squeeze more out of nature than is natural, then we break those cycles. And that's what I had done in that dead mineral medium I described earlier. So it becomes incumbent upon me as a land steward to restart those cycles of nature. And it's not hard, it's very slow. And it cannot be done cost effectively without animal impact. So you read something about the plant-based protein, and I'll comment on that as it applies to regenerative land management. So I am not one of those livestock guys that feels combative or controversial towards people who are vegetarian or vegan. I have the utmost respect for anyone to make that lifestyle choice without input from will. If a person tells me that they don't eat meat because they can't bear the thought of eating something that lived, a little animal, then I respect that. No problem. I will get you some tofu. If I'm told that the mouthfeel is just yucky, they just don't like it, I respect that. That's fine. There are things I don't like. I don't get exposed to that are not necessarily for good reason. But if a person tells me that they're won't eat meat because it's destroying the earth, I will not accept that. That is unacceptable. If you say it's because of the industrial way of production, maybe, but this earth evolved with animal impact. And the earth longs to return to the way it evolved. The best lands in the world, the Great Plains or the Serengeti in Africa, or even the tundra, was evolved by large herds of ruminants being slowly chased across the landscape by predators, packed predators. And that's the way it evolved. And to say that, well, we're going to reinvent this, but we're going to take the animals out of it, it's like saying, I'm going to use my mama's cake recipe, but I'm going to keep the sugar out. you won't get the same result. And again, I've done it over repeatedly, and animal impact is an essential element in regenerative land management. The science that that cows particularly put up more greenhouse gases than they pull down is simply junk science. If you look at on my website, whiteoakpastures.com, under the environmental tab, I think it's land stewardship tab, there is a study that was done here on this farm by an environmental engineering firm called Qantas from Minneapolis that shows that we sequester 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent for every pound of beef we produce. Well, before they paid for that $80,000 study, I already knew that. I didn't know the pounds, but I know that my land gets more carbon in it when there's animals on it. And it is because they, think about it. Just think about photosynthesis. The plant pulls down greenhouse gases through photosynthesis, right? The animal eats that grass, the cow we'll talk about. And yes, there is some flatulence and some that goes up, absolutely. But it came from up there. Much of it goes back into the soil through the development of roots, feces. It's just, it's ludicrous.
I'll just take one more out of the chat room. People are being very quiet tonight and just using the chat room instead of raising their hand and whatnot. So we'll just go along with that. But Andrew Nowak just put in the chat room, several years ago, you were featured in NPR about your struggles with eagles attacking your pastured chicken flocks. Have you been able to keep the eagles in check? Have you seen any other predatory impacts on your herds and flocks in this evolution?
Good memory. Yes, we did. My father nor I had ever seen an eagle on our farm. When we put pasture poultry on the ground in 2010, the eagle population started moving up rapidly, which on the surface is evidence of good ecology, returning species, returning indigenous species. But from a financial perspective, they were causing me to lose a lot of money in the poultry business. And, I didn't mind eagles killing what they needed to live, to eat. I call that tied into nature. But these birds were killing wantonly, and we couldn't do anything about it. And for a couple of years, but a really smart poultry manager that I had figured it out. And here's the deal. So we always had guardian dogs for the poultry, and they did a fantastic job with mammalian predation, whether it's coyotes, bobcats, foxes, raccoons, possums, skunks, whatever. They did a great job because the mammal predators were nocturnal and the dogs were nocturnal. So it all worked fine. The eagles showed up and they were not nocturnal, but the dogs still were. So they did a great job all night keeping the mammal predators off. But when the sun came up, they went to the woods to sleep, and the eagles started just predating wantonly. And I had taken a lot of pride in the fact there was no fencing around my poultry, but my poultry manager started putting electrified netting around to keep the dog in. So in that situation, when it became daylight, the dog couldn't go to the woods, so he stayed with the chickens or poultry. And we still lose some birds to the eagles, but it's what they swoop in and get and go eat. The days of the eagles landing and just killing 100 chickens are gone now, thank goodness.
All right, I got to do one more because it's such a perfect completion question. And it says, did your father live to see some of the changes, and what did he think?
It's a great question. And my father did not. My father actually lived until about 2000. He had dementia and was not aware of what was going on. But I think a lot about what my dad would say. And so a little background. My dad was an only child born in 1920. And I'm an only child born in 1954. So that's very unusual for farm families of those generations to have only children. And so my dad and I were very close. We were like brothers, father, son, business partners, best friends. But he ruled with an iron hand. And he was a child of the Depression, born in 1920, 10 years old when the Depression came. And he was a family of halves that held on to their farm through the Depression. That too was rare. And he was very adverse to borrowing money. And he never borrowed money. And he would not have let me borrow money. So again, I think about it every day. He would be appalled at the fact that I mortgaged the land. He wouldn't have had it. But if he could get past that, he'd be delighted to the impact we've had on the land and the business and the town.
Well, thank you for that question and thank you for that answer. So Will, I guess tonight more than any other night, we might just end by saying peace and love. But thank you so much for all you're doing and for how just demonstrating the kind of the heart and soul and entrepreneurial grit to do what you're doing. There's just so much, you're offering so much to so many people. So thank you. I'm going to stop the recording right now. Before I do, just remind everybody that 2 weeks from now, we're going to do a session called Thoughts on Food and Money in honor of Wendell Berry. And hopefully his daughter will join us for that. I can't assure you of that, but I think it's going to happen. So just check online to see if she's coming, if that makes the difference to you. And then as soon as I stop, and now I'm going to stop the recording and then, but please stay on for a second.